Alright, welcome back to another edition of the Golden Sun No Save and Quit Speedrun tutorial. Last time we cleared through Altmiller and Colosso, and right now we're just kind of at the end of Colosso, just kind of clearing up these last few cutscenes. Just make use of debug mode to make that a little bit easier, clear through these cutscenes really quickly. The only thing you need to know about this bit here is that there's two yes/no dialogue boxes. There's one here, or text. There's a second one, and after the second one you can just hold left and mash, and as soon as the cutscenes are done you'll jump out of bed. So just keep in mind that after the second yes/no, just hold left and mash and you'll be all good. But today we're going to cover Suhalla Desert. Now Suhalla Desert's probably going to be a shorter video, mostly because while there is a lot of technical stuff to the desert, it's not a very long dungeon. Kind of all of the dungeons in this phase of the game are relatively short to get through. They actually are, not a lot of geographical distance. You can blow through them really quickly, but there's a lot of RNG involved in them because the segments are highly dependent on the number of encounters you get. We'll point that out as we get through there. But each encounter basically takes 30 seconds to get through at this point of the game, and as you can imagine, whether or not you get encounters in certain locations or not is going to greatly impact your time. But we will come to that in a little bit. We're just clearing through these last few cutscenes. This cutscene even takes long without dialogue. It's obscene. It's about a 4.5 minute cutscene. Alright, we're done with Barbie. We didn't do the menu in Colosso last time to fix our Djinn. I usually do it after Colosso, but you're more than welcome to do it in Colosso. All we need to do is basically redistribute our Djinn in such a way that we have one Djinn of each element per person, with exception to ground. We'll make sure ground's on Mia so that we can make use of ground if we need to. So the way that I'm going to do it is I'm trying to do it in a way that the Djinn are ending up in places that they're going to be for the final fight. So for me, that means I'm going to start here with Smog. I'm going to put that over to Vine. I'm going to put ground on Mia. I'm going to give granite. For me, I put granite on Ivan. You can put granite on... sorry, I usually put granite on what are we talking about? Granite can go to either of these guys, it doesn't really matter. I think I'm going to put granite on Garrett. I think that looks right. No, it doesn't. What am I talking about? Granite goes here. It doesn't really matter. Like I said, it's not a big deal. Set things up like this. Fantastic. Anyway, it doesn't matter if granite's here or here, it doesn't really matter. The main point is we have 4 Venus Djinns split out, we have ground here, 1 Djinn of each element on everybody, and away we go. Man, that was difficult to get through. It's really not that big of a deal, so pay no attention to my confusion. Alright, now that we're all set up, we can continue on our merry way to Suhalla. So the main strategy in Suhalla is pretty similar to the strategies that you do in the overworld coming out of Altmiller and whatnot, also in Altmiller Cave I should say. In Altmiller Cave, we blow everything up with a tier 4 summon, and that's basically the strategy here. We're going to try and use whatever tier 4 we can to win the fight. Now often that will mean that we'll try and use Judgment, but often Judgment won't kill. So if Thor will kill, even though Thor is slower, we will try and do that. Here's the first bit of RNG, whether or not we get this encounter onto the bridge. There's so many different encounter reset points that whether or not you get the encounter between the encounter reset point, it just adds up. So there you go, there's already a bit of time lost just because of that. Kind of annoying. Right, so now we're in this part of the world. This is where the encounters get really tough. At this point, you really will need to consult the notes to get a comprehensive list of everything. Nice. So normally you can't do that. Normally you're going to get an encounter on the way to Suhalla Desert, but what you should do is you should aim to try and get into Suhalla, and if you can, that means you can reset your encounter. If you happen to get the encounter like right here, for instance, we're just going to force the encounter anyway, just to prove a point. Eventually, well, you go, well, that's annoying, but we'll just continue on our way to Suhalla. So only enter and exit Suhalla if you can get the encounter reset, which in this case we're able to get that. That looks like it happens about 20% of the time or something like that. Anyway, we clear these fights according to what the notes tell you to clear it by. There's too many special cases for me to cover in this tutorial, and that's basically going to be the theme throughout. But in this instance, I know that the bee will die to pretty much anything, and this troll, this kobold here, is weak to Jupiter, so I'm going to use Thor on the kobold, and that should kill it. I hope, fingers crossed. Yeah, it does. So generally you want to do that as much as possible. I think in that instance I could have gotten away with a judgment, but it's not really worth it. Worth it to try. Anyway, the path through Suhalla Desert is pretty straightforward. We can basically just come to the left, then go to the right, and continue right, but we'll see that. We're going to use douse 3 times, so I'm going to hotkey douse hotkey douse over retreat. And yeah, that's that. Okay. How do we do the tornado lizard fights? So this is an interesting question, and it basically pertains to both of these things right here. Are you going to go for the retreat warps, and how do you want to do your tornado lizard fights? There's kind of 2 options here, so let's get into the fight. Okay. There are 2 ways to do the fight, and it basically comes down to whether or not you're going to use ground or not. So in theory, what you should do is ground, judgment, and Tiamat with Ivan. That is the judgment Tiamat is the fastest way to kill a storm lizard, hands down. Aside from the instant kill, which you can do in any percent, this is the fastest way to kill. Using ground prevents the tornado lizard from doing anything, and so in theory, this fight here is the fastest it could possibly be. However, if you feel like you want to go for the retreat warps, that means you need to drain your PP in some kind of efficient manner. We've already seen that the fastest way to drain PP is either via move cancelling, which we can't do, or by healing. So what I like to do is, because I like to go for the retreat warps, and I'll explain why probably in the next video, is I like to take damage on these fights, heal it off with Isaac when I get an opportunity to, and then make use of the retreat warps. But it's entirely up to you. If you're not going to go for the retreat warps, they don't save that much time, they may not even save time, they may lose you time. Just put that out there. Then use ground, clear through these fights as quickly as possible, and go ham. So, I'm going to do the retreat warp setup because that's just what I do. So in this case, I just do Judgment Tiamat, and I just leave Mia to defend, and that's not a problem. Attack, that's not good. Ideally you get Wing Flutter because that allows you to drain more PP, but this is still fine. Okay, fantastic. We got through the first encounter. Alright. So, as I mentioned, this part of the game is extremely RNG heavy. I'm going to make a note here, RNG heavy segment or something. Because if you get the encounter between the 2 storm lizards, tornado lizards, sorry, that's basically incurring you an additional encounter of time loss. So, unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to eat the time loss if it happens. It sucks that this happens, like, after all of the hard stuff, you get slapped with so many instances of RNG potentially screwing you over, but that's just this category. Anyway, we got lucky, we didn't get the encounter between the 2 things, and we can just, we can heal off the damage, using Cure, then Cure Well to maximize my PP drain there. Cure Well heals me to full, but if I do Cure Well I can drain 10 instead of 7, so that's useful. And then dive straight into this encounter, where I'm going to do exactly what I did before. Judgment Tiamat, not going to worry about ground. And ideally we get Wing Flutter, or Storm Ray, or something like that, that hurts a lot of people. Ward, that's not what I want to see. Ward's actually going to elongate this fight by an additional turn, so that's kind of frustrating. Oh, at least we got Wing Flutter. So this is the danger you run into with using the groundless strat, sorry. Sometimes he's going to take additional time, so how can I kill this from here? Probably Neroid. So that's a little bit of a bother, but that's okay. So again, usually you get 1 encounter between these two tornado lizards. Sometimes you can get 2 encounters. If you get really lucky, you can get none. And we got one right before the tornado, which is fairly typical. Magicals are weak to Mercury, so we're just going to slap a Boreas on them. The Magicals, for instance, need a targeted Boreas to kill, so we keep that in the back of our minds. Again, the notes should make note of this. So look at our damage. Basically, we can't do anything other than use Cure Well, so this is a good 14 PP drained. Even though we can't recover all of our Djinn before this fight, that's fine. We're going to use Judgment Tiamat anyway, we don't need to use Boreas, so that's fine. Stormrace good. That's another 14 damage, 14 PP that we can drain off at another point in time. And if you look at my PP now, I have 18. So I'm actually in a really good range to be able to set up my retreat warps later on. Harridans. These guys are weak to Jupiter, so I'm going to blast the Thor on them. Thor should kill both. There we go. So a lot of the time save in this part of the game is A, getting lucky, and B, using the right summons. If I'd used Judgment there, for instance, they both would not have died, they would have got actions off and things would have got hairy. Actually, you should hotkey reveal at this point, so I'm going to do that. Already seen the Magic Orb, so we'll do that. And now we come to Flash. So Flash is pretty interesting, so we can do Flash from a lot of different places. Again, Flash, you have a choice. You can attempt to do this without using Ground, but I find that Flash is sufficiently mean that there is a chance people die and all those kinds of nasty things, so even though it may be better for me to not for me to take extra damage in this fight and not use Ground, I still like to use Ground just for the security. It also means I can keep this 14 damage on me for a bit later without having to heal it off, so that's kind of helpful. So the way you do this, you do Ground, Ground Judgment, defend Boreas, and that's the quickest way to end this fight. Okay, there is... Okay, so we keep setting Ground in these fights just because Ground gives us the... If we got an encounter where we can't kill all of the enemies with one tier 4, it allows us to like block one of the enemies and then follow it up with damage from like Isaac or something. Now we have Flash. I actually want to leverage Flash as much as possible. Flash is, generally speaking, superior to Ground in its ability to protect us from death in a fight. It's not so much apparent in Suhalla, but as we progress through the game, we're basically going to be leaning on Flash exclusively to not die. There are instances where Ground is going to be a faster Djinn to use, but I find that Flash is pretty much sufficient, so Flash is super important. Unsurprisingly, we all know how insane Flash is. So, Flash is so insane, I'm going to move him off Isaac, put it onto Mia for Forge, and set Flash. So now anytime I get an encounter, I want to lean on Flash to mitigate any damage I may or may not take. So I'm not even going to bother setting Ground, because I personally think Flash is all you need. You can, however, also set Ground if you're so inclined. As I mentioned, if you have one enemy that's just going to outspeed Ivan, it can be better in some circumstances to use Ground. Ground is a quicker animation than Flash, let's just put that out there as well. But again, kind of runner's preference, so what you want to do there. Again, I like to keep Flash there, but entirely up to you. So now we've got to run away from our good friend the Storm Lizard. So this guy down here. I'm currently chilling on this ledge here, and the Storm Lizard's actually not going to come after you until you hit one of these squares here. So I'm not triggering him, but if I go down here, he's on his way now. Hello, Mr. Storm Lizard. So you have a little bit of room to play with, even though I'm just kind of chilling here. The thing about the Storm Lizard is that it's relatively easy to escape Suhalla without being caught. You just need to run straight to the exit, and almost every single time you will not get caught. to get caught, basically what happens is every time you open the menu or get an encounter, the Storm Lizard gets a little bit of movement in on you. That the Storm Lizard moves a little bit. It moves a little bit that normally it wouldn't be able to move, and catches up on you a little bit. I did the math. It takes 11 encounters or menu opens before you will be caught by the Storm Lizard. So, even if you get 3 encounters to the end of Suhalla Desert, which is like unlucky but reasonable, 3 encounters to the end plus 3 menus, you still have about 4 or 5 menu opens, or at least 4 menu opens left, or 2 more encounters left with menus before you get caught. So don't feel too bad if you have to open the menu, or if you get an encounter, just keep moving. It may look a little bit dicey, but you have quite a lot of tolerance, so we'll just do that. So you want to move through here. It may take a little bit of practice to get the movement down, but it's really quite straightforward. I can take more damage from these guys, so I'm going to use Flash, just so I can take some extra damage from these jokers. Perfect. Alright, that's going to allow me to drain all my PP. I guess alternatively, if you don't want to take damage on the Storm Lizards, you can do Flash on some of these fights here and just take extra damage. That may be a better strategy actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, but whatever. Really important that after the encounter you keep moving, and otherwise we're going to make it to the end without any problem. Easy peasy. Let's just, before we end this video, because we're basically done now, we've gone through Suhalla, we're going to do the next block basically up to the Tunnel Ruins basically. But before we do that, let's just illustrate what I mean by opening the menu and so on and so forth. So as I'm moving, I can open the menu, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, notice how it's moving, 9, 10, alright, we're at 10, we got caught by an encounter, am I going to get caught now? One more and I got caught, there we go, so that's like 12 encounters, so that's not too bad. If you get caught, well, tough biscuits. There's nothing you can do about it, it's all over. So yeah, that's Suhalla Desert. It's relatively straightforward. The only thing you have to worry about is the menu at the beginning, which is relatively easy. Make some decisions around if you're going for the retreat warps. If you are, you want to take damage at some point, whether that's from the Tornado Lizards, Flash, or an encounter, that's entirely up to you. And finally, be aware of all the RNG, in that the number of encounters you get between each of the each of the Tornado Lizards, and the Tornado Lizard to Flash, and then Flash to the exit, like, that's going to greatly influence your time as well. It only gets worse from here, like, this bit that we're about to enter is horrific, but yeah. And finally, Storm Lizard, you have a lot of room to play with, just keep moving and you'll be fine. So I think that's good enough for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Next time, like I said, we'll go through to the start of Tunnel Ruins, or Barbie Lighthouse rather, and then yeah, we're basically almost at the end of the game. So thank you for sticking with me, let me know what you think, and we'll see you in the next one.